I'm actually really excited for this one. As a cloud engineer who runs a DevOps meetup, this talk is what shape is a platform? And we have Andy and Julian from one of the sponsors today, the headline sponsor, Gearset, here to tell us all about it. Over to you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
It's wonderful to be with you today. Thank you for coming to our talk, where we're going to be talking about platform engineering at Gearset. We're making a pretty bold assumption here that you all know what we mean by platform engineering. We reckon that by the time most companies have reached like a few dozen engineers, they'll have established some kind of function that looks after internal tooling and infrastructure. Whether or not you call that a platform team, hopefully you know what we're talking about when we're talking about our talk today.
If you've got like a quick show of hands on like if you work on a platform team at your company, or if yeah, we've got a few hands going up. Awesome. But also lots of hands staying down. But that's cool. I think there's something for everyone in this talk, because as you'll probably find out, one of the things that we did at Gearset to help build our platform team was bring in software engineers like Julian onto our platform group. And that's been very successful for us. So yeah, most of our talk's going to be about how we actually evolved our really small DevOps team into a much larger platform group that could support Gearset as we scaled up and added more and more engineers, more and more customers. And we're going to be talking more about how we did that rather than what we did, so that hopefully you can kind of take some lessons from that if you're also going through a journey of growth in your own companies.
Yeah, so as a little overview of our agenda, we'll start with some introductions and a bit of scene setting about what Gearset is and kind of the rough landscape that we're working in, what our team looked like a few years ago and what it looks like today. And then we'll be diving into 3 specific examples of how we grew platform at Gearset. And finally, we'll reflect on the things that helped us on our journey and take a little peek at what comes next for us in the future. Cool.
Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm loving the peak 90s Britney Spears vibe going on here. I'm also the platform lead at Gearset. I'm fortunate enough to work with all the amazing teams that make for our platform group. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I spent most of my career kind of building tools that help SaaS companies to kind of scale and secure their applications. And now I work at Gearset, where I get to use those tools day to day, which is way cooler than building them.
Yeah, and I'm Julian. I am on the team focusing on operability in the platform group. And I'm probably best described as a software engineer in SRE clothing. I kind of stumbled into it starting as a software engineer, and then when things were on fire, I kind of got interested, and now I'm here dealing with that full time.
So yeah, Julian and I joined Gearset a few years ago. We were very rapidly growing our engineering headcount, and this photo shows where we're at not that long after we joined. If you've got really keen eyesight, if you're incredibly good at Where's Wally, and maybe if you also packed a telescope into your bag, you might be able to spot us on that slide. There we are. So fast forward a few years, like 4 years on from that photograph, the engineering team at Gearset scaled from about 30 to about 100 engineers, and the whole company is about 350, 60 people now. But there's Julian and I still looking a little bit more seasoned, shall we say, but still thoroughly enjoying the ride that we're on. So this talks about how we responded to that rapid growth, going from 30 to 100 engineers, and how we made sure that the engineering department was still putting in really good software, being able to release that quickly and efficiently to our customers.
Yeah, so given this talks about what the changes we made at Gearset, a little bit of context is probably useful. So in a nutshell, Gearset is a software as a service product that runs in AWS. We have thousands of customers who use our product day to day to manage their Salesforce orgs. That means that they're taking their Salesforce org configuration and using source control to manage it in large teams and deal with merge conflicts, interdependencies, and making sure that things run smoothly. We're kind of going beyond that, and we're trying to build a wider platform that teams can use, meaning we also offer a tool that backs up their Salesforce data, monitors what's going on in production, and a UI testing tool which will run automated UI tests in their org. But what we're talking about today is the platform we built on. So when we talk about platform, we mean all the shared systems, tools, and services that support our engineering teams to deliver the functions of Gearset. This starts with their developer environments, making sure that the solution builds, tests run, everything's up to date, and generally people can work effectively in their day-to-day. It includes our build pipeline, so how we go from code being created to code being run in production. our observability tooling, which checks and double checks what's going on in production, meaning we can confirm what our customers are doing and if our code is working. And last but not least, is the actual infrastructure on which all our code runs.
Yeah, this talk's been like super interesting for us to write because obviously we've both been on that journey together. As you probably twigged, we've now got a reasonably sized platform team that basically contributes to directly to all of those things that Julian was just talking about. But that wasn't always the case. When we started at Gearset, we only had a very small DevOps team. And we've had to gradually build up that platform team over time to respond to the problems that developed as we got bigger and bigger. And some of the decisions that we took seem kind of obvious now, but organizational debt is really hard to change. Even when you're kind of small company like Gearset and you're quite agile, you can adapt to changes. But we hope this talk's going to give you a little bit of insight into how you can kind of approach problems and provide a bit of guidance and inspiration to you if you start seeing similar problems sort of manifesting in your own companies as you grow.
Yeah, so to illustrate some of the points we want to talk about in this talk, this was the shape of our engineering org when Andy and I joined a few years ago. We have a bunch of streamlined teams, and Andy's going to explain what that means in a minute. They're all building great features for our customers. They all had various silly names, which kind of originally were based around like a color theme, but kind of diverged into basically anything that the team lead decided on when they were making the team. Then over there on the right, we have the DevOps team, which was just two specialists underpinning like most of our platform. They were in the dark, both kind of literally and metaphorically. They had their little space in the corner of the office, which was unbelievably dark. But also they had so many responsibilities that few people really understood day to day. We kind of all knew that we needed them and that if they kind of disappeared, we'd be in a bit of a pickle, but we didn't really know what they did. Fast forward a few years, and this is the shape of our engineering org today. We've developed the part of the organization that focuses on our internal tools and infrastructure into a set of teams we call our platform group. And this is much better equipped to reliably support the needs of our engineering teams. But crucially, you'll spot that we've massively scaled the number of feature teams, keeping the silly names, of course. We've added in some dragon fruits, some cobalts, a snowdrop, plenty more like that. But the point of this talk is not to tell you what Gearset's platform team looks like. It's to emphasize that a platform team needs to fit the shape of your engineering org, and to tell you about the things that helped us as we define the shape of platform at Gearset.
Yeah, so what is it that kind of makes Gearset's engineering team so special? What's like the non-negotiables that we've got? Is there any Arsenal fans out there? What's the solid core of our engineering team that has kind of helped shape our platform? For us, we think that's our stream-aligned teams with really good flow and limited inter-team dependencies. And that's a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll break it down into the separate components there. But first, I just want to give a little shout out to this excellent book, Team Topologies. I'm sure some of you have already read it, but it's got loads of great information in it about how to think about structuring teams. And we didn't like to start with that, but we actually used that to help us kind of shape our thinking and tell us where our pains were actually coming from. So start with stream-aligned. So in the context of the Team Topologies book, this is basically a team that's responsible for a single flow of value, so like really hyper-focused on one thing and delivering that value consistently to customers. That could be like a product, a service, or a specific set of features, and this kind of neatly describes how our product teams work at Gearset. In order to do that effectively, those teams need to have flow. Teams need to be continuously and reliably delivering value to the customers without being interrupted, because any kind of distractions really upsets your ability to move quickly. And finally, the limited inter-team dependencies is about maintaining that flow. If teams have to plan around each other and they struggle to adapt quickly to changes, and they lose the benefits of getting that fast feedback.
On which note, the other thing we think makes us special is our ability to ship changes quickly and confidently. That lets us really take advantage of our streamlined teams because we're able to generate and get customer feedback on a really regular basis, and we can work on our features incrementally. We release new versions of Gearset twice a day, but crucially, teams know that these releases don't have to be perfect. We take on a little bit of risk because we know that we can very quickly roll back a release if something is wrong. It takes a couple of minutes at max. The ability to react dynamically has got us out of many a pickle in the last few years, and has priced us in our development focus and our ability to scale. That capability doesn't come for free, and the bigger the engineering team gets, the harder it is to maintain that capability. In addition to regular improvements to our core platform, we've also been able to expand into new product areas, so our customers are getting more value every week. And the most recent 2 product launches have been pretty cool, because in the space of 2 months, they went from the first lines of code being written to real customers actually paying for the product. And our product teams have been able to deliver even more value than ever in a code base that's growing in complexity and scale.
So how did we go about reshaping our engineering org to handle all that growth? Well, we tried to tackle it one problem at a time. We drill down into the root of that particular issue that was being surfaced, identify an approach for solving it, and then kind of try and iterate on that outcome. And so trying to keep up with the platform theme here, we've structured the rest of this talk around 3 sort of gaps that we've identified as we've grown. And I promise this is very limited use of AI that we've done in this talk. But the first gap that we're trying to tackle is what we've sort of characterized as an ownership gap, where if the developer's really intensely focused on building features, then who's actually supporting what's going on in production? If things start breaking, who's going to jump on that and handle it if the teams aren't able to be distracted? The second gap that we called out is a focus gap. So if all of the product teams are focused on delivering features to the customers, then who's actually focusing on delivering value to the engineers themselves? And the third gap is the skills gap. So if we've got teams working independently and we've got specialist skills that have become distributed between all those teams, how do we actually make best use of those skills to keep up with the ever-increasing complexity of our application?
So we'll start with the ownership gap. Who takes responsibility when things are breaking, when all the alarm bells are ringing and customers are shouting down the phone? As a small team, we managed pretty well when things went wrong in production. Releases were small, and the DevOps team had a pretty decent handle on everything that was included in the release. If something went wrong, they could usually spot it pretty quickly from the infrastructure level telemetry. For example, you can see a queue backing up because we've stopped consuming on the other end. The team could look at what was released recently and identify the likely PR, and as you can see, each release had only a handful of PRs to look through. When they've identified the PR, they could kick off a rollback, which would be done within a couple of minutes, and get us back to a known good state. When they needed to, they could bring in other engineers and swarm on the problem, ready for a fix to be ready for the next release. All working really smoothly at that sort of scale. But my slides disappeared. As our team grew and our app got more complicated, this approach didn't scale. The rate of production issues was increasing, but the knowledge required to triage those issues was also getting more difficult and getting harder for one team to keep track of. Pinning down the issue to one PR and a large release was no longer obvious. This meant the DevOps team spent more time triaging and regularly distracted them from their planned work. And the developers shipping the code got further and further away from what was actually happening in production. Incidents became a real point of friction because they were both everyone's problem and no one's problem. No one really understood who owned a part of the application and when it was running in production, and so issues would have the potential to fall through the gaps or not get picked up. Not only that, but the tools the DevOps team were using to understand what was going on did a great job of giving an insight into the infrastructure issues, but digging deeper into the application's behavior was really challenging.
Yeah, and that tooling gap also impacted us on another level. So as we onboarded more and more customers, it became harder and harder to kind of isolate their individual workloads and see how they were performing. So one misbehaving workload, because we run our app multi-tenancy. So if one customer goes a little bit rogue, that might have an impact on other customers. But all we really had was logs and that infrastructure level telemetry. So you couldn't get that deep insight into the application and figure out what specific workload was going wrong to dig into it and investigate it. And the engineers couldn't really help support us with that. But we were full of ideas. In fact, it seemed like everyone in engineering had an idea of how to solve this problem. So given all those different perspectives, there was definitely potential for picking any one particular direction to kind of lose the engagement of people who didn't kind of agree with that approach or had a different idea. So in order to try and get ahead of that, we asked people, we kind of narrowed the scope of the problem first. We sort of made it really clear what problems we were trying to solve and what problems we weren't trying to solve. And then anyone who really felt quite strongly about their idea, we asked them to write it down so that we just had that really clear set of information that we could balance the benefits and trade-offs of each approach and weigh that up against the thing that really, the constraints that we've identified that we want to stick to, that we talked about earlier. And that left us with 4 options to choose from. I'm actually going to go and talk through all of these independently because I think that really helps to illustrate how we factored in that special source, like the stream-aligned team stuff, into making a call on how we actually solve this problem. So the first idea that people came up with was what we called quarterly ownership. So on the left there, we've got our feature teams who are building and shipping features and getting them shipped into production. Awesome. But who's supporting those things in production? So first idea was get those same feature teams to basically rotate quarterly and take responsibility for owning the application in production. But we decided not to go with that approach because we thought having quarterly ownership would kind of inhibit our ability to develop the tooling. People weren't kind of focused on that project for long enough to actually deliver anything meaningful from it. So we had a second idea, which was actually to like go into our application and break it up into the individual services, and then bring in some new teams whose sole responsibility would be to own those services and make them operate more effectively in production. But we weren't quite at the right scale at the point in time to do that. Like those teams would be fairly small. They wouldn't really be doing stuff most of the time. So it's like an idea that we put a pin in for the future, but we also didn't really want to entrench our architecture and kind of commit to having that sort of setup of services. Maybe we want to switch that up in the future. And that's, as I said before, organizational change is hard to do. Bit of Conway's law going on there. So the third idea, which was actually a really nice one, was basically what probably a lot of people do is have your feature teams kind of own what they've shipped in production. You know, you built it, you run it, kind of idea. But the issue here is that we felt like, if we didn't have the right tooling to support that, then the engineers couldn't do a great job of figuring out what's going on in production. And also these teams at the kind of moment in time that Gearset was at here, they were jumping around between different features all the time. They were really agile. We were getting through lots of different features, so they weren't like focused on one area long enough to make this really viable. So what we landed on was our quarterly ownership model, where we created a whole new team and we staffed it with a couple of people who were there permanently, one of which is Julian. And then we'd rotate in members of the other development teams on a quarterly basis to go and staff that team.
Yeah, so we picked this option because we felt it let us combine the best parts of all the other proposals. It gave us a static platform team who could spend time improving the tooling and the kind of underlying experience of resolving incidents and looking at issues. It clarified the ownership of the production issues. The new team would be accountable for triaging issues where it was evident the application wasn't working properly, but it's still a shared responsibility to get the issues resolved. This wasn't code being thrown over the fence and saying, oh, you can go deal with it. And finally, it led to the team to naturally deliver enablement, because the rest of the engineering team was naturally rotating through the team. So people would come in, they'd get some experience, and then they'd go back to their team and take a bunch of what they learned about telemetry, resolving incidents, speaking to customers, all of that stuff. And that became our Tangerine team.
Yeah, I'm sure Julian will attest, as one of the founding members, that that's been actually rather successful. We originally thought that the team might engineer itself out of existence after a couple of years, but it's, 3 years now, and it's still going super strong and having a really valuable impact on the company. Because our telemetry and our tooling is all vastly superior now. It's like based heavily around traces. We use Honeycomb. It allows engineers to dig really deep into the application's behavior and investigate anomalous behavior. And we've also found that observability is useful for far more than just incident resolution. It gives great insights into what customers are actually doing in our product, and it's kind of facilitated a bit of a culture change around that. We also continue to be able to handle production issues really rapidly, because the Tangerine team are always like the first ones on the scene. They can triage it, they can get the right people involved. And we've gone ahead and rotated, 6 people through the team so far. So we've spread that knowledge around the rest of our engineering organization, and we still see those folks rapidly coming back on to help out with incidents, even when they're not part of this new Tangerine team. So all that enablement work that they've done has actually kind of taught others how to instrument the application, how to use our telemetry tools, and it's allowed us to kind of evolve the way that we support our application even beyond just introducing that Tangerine team into what it looks like now, which you'll probably see is quite similar to that model that we really wanted to take on earlier on, where the feature teams are actually supporting their application in production. Gearset's come a long way since then. We've got more consistent assignment of teams to areas of the product, but we've still got that Tangerine team acting as an enablement function, helping to diagnose issues, helping to share the knowledge about the tooling, and that's working really well for us.
Yeah. So what made the approach successful? Well, in kind of brief terms, the people close to the issues were involved in surfacing the pains, and so we were able to actually address the root of the issue. The evaluation process made sure that we were considering the different trade-offs based on the team's experiences, and we also limited the scope of the change to supporting our growth. for another couple of years rather than trying to solve everything all at once. That meant that we could iterate and improve and take advantage of a learning process to figure out what the best eventual solution would be rather than committing to perfect now. And that was our ownership gap.
Yeah, so that brings us on to our second gap, the focus gap. So as we scaled, we were finding it harder and harder to keep up with developer experience, essential maintenance, and some of the tech debt that we'd built up from the start of Gearset that started to cause us problems. So we felt we needed to take a little step back there and make sure we were putting enough focus into how we build software. So first problem there was the developer experience. As we get a bigger and bigger team, like the impact of having quality developer experience really has a multiplier effect. We really need the engineers to have really solid tooling and practices to just keep delivering value quickly and efficiently. We also started to struggle a little bit with essential maintenance. It became more and more of a distraction to people, like disturbing them from their daily flow, getting features out to customers. And those upgrades started to get more and more complicated. So we've got to do things like .NET upgrades, and we found that the blast radius of those suddenly became a lot larger. You had to take time out to test it, and pretty much every upgrade that we've done recently, we actually had to go and make fixes in .NET Core itself because it was causing memory leaks or something like that. So yeah, basically huge amounts of disruption for our stream-aligned teams. And the third problem was one of technical debt. So actually, Gearset started life as a desktop service. So we ship it out to customers. But very quickly, we pivoted to being a cloud-based service, a SaaS product. But we still, in the true interest, the core values of Gearset, we iterated, we delivered it quickly, we got stuff in front of customers, but that meant we built up a little bit of technical debt in the way that the product was architected, and that became harder and harder to resolve. You need really a serious time investment to fix those things up, and the way that we were set up, nobody kind of had the time available to fix those things.
Yeah, so we brought in the technical roadmap. The idea was that we had multiple ways to address product roadmap things. We had quarterly planning cycles to look further into the future. We had a weekly meeting to have reactive roadmap conversations with customer support and sales. And we even had a Slack channel for engineering small enhancements. But we didn't have somewhere to surface technical engineering pain. So that came the technical roadmap. So we had a meeting twice every other week where developers would come along and they'd write a short proposal detailing an idea. And it'd just be 4 questions. So firstly, describe the problem, understand the issue at its heart, explain why the problem is important, because we want to make sure that we're solving the most impactful issues to our engineers, suggest a solution or canvas for options, depending on if you feel like you've got one particular idea that's the right thing or a number of options that you want to consider. And finally, considering the downsides and alternatives. By getting our engineers to write these things down, we were able to have a productive conversation with a small group of interested people, and then we could help figure out what the next steps needed to be to solve those problems.
That's awesome, but who actually does the work? We've got all the ideas together. We've got a nice little roadmap, but we need someone to actually do it. So initially, we used the tech roadmap basically just as a prioritization mechanism. We'd find out the most impactful things. We'd make sure we really understood what problem we were trying to solve. And then we actually had the support of our product team to go and factor those into the quarterly plans of our feature development teams, which is probably a better position than most companies find themselves in. So kudos to our product team for that. But what we found here, probably unsurprisingly, that it kept being the same team that picked up that work because they were the ones that were already disrupted. So you weren't disturbing them from getting stuff out to customers if you just kept giving the kind of maintenance platform work to that group. So yeah, their work was so impactful, we ended up just making that the full-time team and got them to work on those things all the time. They became the custodians of the technical roadmap. They do the work to prioritize it, and they can also pull in the other engineering teams to help out on those things if and when we need it. And they also kept their silly team name. That's our Onyx team, which we, developer experience and architecture. So why did that work? Well, the tech roadmap really helped us out because it made the problem visible. It made the scale of the focus issue that we had, it put it out in front of everyone. And that's often the first stage of making a change, is to make something seen, make it measurable, and then you can much more easily kind of tackle that issue. So having that dedicated backlog of internal-facing work let us prioritize it, build it into our planning process, and we carved out the focus time to actually address those things and assign them some ownership. And we also had our developers involved at every stage here. So they are encouraged to make suggestions, work together to understand the root of the problem. And sometimes we could just resolve their developer experience issues by having that conversation and realizing that they actually just need to set things up a little differently. So really great forum on that front. And then for the more significant projects, we started out small by using our existing process of getting things into the quarterly roadmap of the teams. And then we let that solution sort of evolve over time and grow into the dedicated team that we put on that project.
So the third gap we attempted to tackle was a skills gap, specifically around application security. And we're going to go through this one fairly quickly because we're a bit short on time. So we've also always taken security very seriously, all the way through our product. And we started out with a very small group of highly experienced engineers who were well-versed in secure development practices. But as the team grew and the code base grew, that expertise gets spread more thinly. And rigorous security development practices got kind of spread out throughout the team, even though guardrails and security requirements became even more important. Not only that, we had ongoing efforts to address certain security roadmap sort of stuff, and we weren't finding the space to address those things in the product teams. And finally, we had ongoing work with pen testing and a bug bounty platform that was bringing in vulnerabilities and security issues, but didn't have the right set of people to actually go address them. And shout out to Instill, of course. It's great to see those guys here today as well.
Yeah, in a nutshell, we made an AppSec team. We started out with some folks who were keen inside Gearset rather than hiring into it. We let them kind of learn and grow into that role over time. We didn't expect them to just land running. So we started out with fix some very specific things, and then they turned into more of an enablement role, putting in guardrails, best practices, that kind of stuff. Became like a real cultural enabler for us. And all this stuff that we don't have time to talk about.
So the reason we think that mechanism worked for us is that we were able to match the solution to the existing level of experience. So we recognized that we didn't have security expertise in the team already, and so we gave the space to develop that without hiring in specialists. People often talk about learning from your failures, but we also learned from our successes. We learned that having teams that had a clear objective and focus was really beneficial to solve some of these gaps and problems that we were having. Again, we were iterating, we were adapting, we were letting the team grow, and we were working backwards and using the technical roadmap, which we'd already introduced, to set the team up for success by having some small, well-scoped projects for them to work on and to start with so they could get to know our infrastructure better.
So yeah, that brings us back to our original premise. What shape is a platform? And the answer is, really, like most things, it depends. But that's a pretty lame answer. So in the quiet zen of the green room upstairs, decided to instead coin the term, a platform is shaped by the forces of the environment it supports, which I'm sure you'll agree is very deep and meaningful. But really, between the nature of the applications that you're supporting and the culture of your company, platform teams are a really new thing. And you can kind of see that in all the silly names that we have for platform-related teams. A little constellation of different team names there, and I've highlighted our stars within it. But I'm sure you've got some blend of those things. It just really highlights the diversity and the need to adapt to the industry and to the way that your org is changing. So yeah, just to wrap up then, our takeaways from this are trying to find a theme that threads throughout all the ideas that we use to kind of build our platform. The first thing was to really start with a problem. So try to make that visible, try to dig to the root of the issues that are actually affecting people that they're calling out. We try to make sure that change is done for people, not to people. And we also used resources like the Team Topologies book, not as a starting point, but just to kind of guide our thinking and tune that to our own situation. We also tried to design solutions that kind of fit the constraints and the culture of our company. So we tried to protect the things that make us great at building software, so the streamlined development teams that we talked about earlier. And we use that to guide all of our decision making. And then we also tried to create clarity and focus and flow in everything that we did. So assigning clear owners and specific objectives seemed to work really well. You see that through like the technical roadmap and through the new teams that we created. We always tried to make it really clear what their objectives were and carve out bits of ownership for them. And then finally, we tried to create feedback loops. Try to get early feedback on things. We prefer to give things a try and let them kind of evolve naturally so that we can learn from them. And also respect that people themselves have learning curves. You can't just like drop them in a situation and expect them to do perfectly. But given enough time and space, they will ramp up and they'll do great work. And that's kind of evident through none of the solutions that we actually chose, really working out the way that we envisaged, but all eventually forming up to do something really good for us.
And finally, remember that this is a journey, not a destination. If, as Andy so wisely just put it, a platform is shaped by the forces of the environment it supports, then if the environment is constantly growing and changing and adapting, then the platform will have to adapt to accommodate that. We're seeing our role develop from being purely implementation-driven to also performing an enabling function to upskill other teams and make sure that the organization as a whole is well equipped to be ready for a platform and the changes that we need. AI is already changing the way we build and run our software, but we think our platform is in a great shape to respond to that change and take advantage of the benefits AI brings.
So yeah, thanks for listening. It's been a fairly personal journey for us, but we hope some of the things that we've tried, some of the things that we've succeeded at, some of the things that we haven't done so well at will kind of help you in your own journeys. And then we'd really love to hear about them. So what does platform mean to you? What makes your company special? How does platform work in your organization? How has it evolved over time? Do you even have a platform team? If you want to ask questions now, awesome. If you want to meet us at our booth out there, also awesome. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andy and Julian. Do we have any questions from the audience? One down here. I'll get it.
Thank you for the talk. So basically, I find myself as an SRE entering into a development team with the task of basically bringing other developers and turning them into DevOps, whatever DevOps means. Do you have any guidance or tips on that process of bringing someone who's only building an application or platform and turning them into people that care about also operating the platform?
Yeah, you've got good ideas on that
definitely.
one, Julian.
So I have thoughts about that. So we've had that problem as well. So when we formed the Tangerine team, that was absolutely one of the things we wanted to address. And I think one of the things was we ran specific workshops with a team and said, talk to us about the feature you're building. How would you know if it stopped working? Like simple question. What would you expect to see if suddenly it wasn't doing the thing you expected it to? And often the answer we'd get is, well, customers would tell us. And then the responses were yeah, fine, okay, that's certainly one way of approaching it, but it's not a great signal. If you're just waiting for your customers to tell you when things go wrong, then you can probably do better. And that was our entry point to then say, well, how about we step back and say, well, what would a healthy system look like? How would you define that? And so you have to put in the telemetry to figure out what healthy is, and then you can say, oh well, if you know what healthy is, you probably know what unhealthy is, and you can probably add alerts around that. And so rather than framing it and saying, oh, we need you to do SRE better, we need you to do telemetry better, start from what's your customer problem? How would you know if they were having a bad time? And often unexpected things come in. Like when we really instrumented deeply some bits of our core code base, we suddenly went, we're doing some insane things here. We're doing 50 database queries in a really tight for loop. Why is that and when developers spot that, they go, oh, that's really cool. And that driver as well really helps them to go, oh, well, this code that I thought worked this way actually works a different way in production. And even those little surprises kind of encourage people to think a bit more about what does this look like in production, rather than oh, I can write my unit tests and my integration tests, and that's the end of my box. Hope that helps.
Yeah, there's also a kind of fun game that we play sometimes where you can take a developer and say, your code is absolutely hammering the database in production. Prove me wrong. And then you suddenly get that realization, oh, actually, I can't prove you wrong. And that really forces the hand to go and add the right telemetry to absolve them of any responsibility for doing anything wrong in production.
Love that. Do we have any more questions? One from me then. So when you went from having static developer teams to having your quarterly ownership model where developers rotate around every quarter, what was the reaction from developers and how did you get them excited for the change?
It's kind of one person every quarter from a team rotating in. So basically we have to find a person every quarter who's willing to do it. So we put out a call to arms on Slack and say, hey, it's the next quarter. Does anyone want to have a turn in the Tangerine team? And then behind the scenes, we're poking people and controlling them and getting them excited in it because honestly, people do really want to spend their time building features and doing that work. That's really engaging. But when they find out about the fun challenges that exist on the Tangerine team, when they get to work with people like Julian, actually there is quite a lot of interest and excitement to learn those skills and to be able to take them back. So it's a marketing exercise more than anything.
And I think a lot of the conversations started in the lunch queue. I literally just be chatting to people and being like, oh, this is what I was up to. And they're like, oh, that sounds quite cool. And it's not I think a lot of the time it wasn't that people didn't care about it, it's just that they didn't really think about it. It wasn't in there, it wasn't what their team was talking about. And so kind of even just that exposure and lightly going, oh, well, I'm working on this, or oh, this sort of thing we're looking at kind of helped get that interest and get people keen to join the team. And we have a fairly nice steady influx of people that are oh, I'm interested to try this out.
Yeah, encouraging people to participate in incident response as well. And you sort of, during that call, you're just sort of sitting in the background, you're watching what's going on, but then you can see these guys who have been through the cycle in the team, being able to drive the tooling and just someone asks a question which regions is it impacting? And then they just go, and you've got this beautiful visualization of, it's exactly in those regions and it's on those services. And that's, it's just kind of a cool thing to see someone do. And you're like, well, I want to do that. So, marketing.
Brilliant. And great marketing with team names like Tangerine and so on. So time for one more question. Or is everyone just really keen for lunch?
We do have a Venn diagram of all of our team names as well if you want to investigate that. We've tried to map them out.
All right then. Thank you, Julian and Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.